If I had known the woman I pulled from that burning car was a millionaire, I might have run the other way. The words would come to haunt Noah Carter later. But on that freezing night, he had no idea that the decision he made in a matter of seconds would change the course of his entire life. The wind howled through the empty streets of Chicago as Noah stepped out the back door of the diner where he worked the late shift. The smell of fried onions and coffee clung to his jacket, and the cold bit sharply at his face. It was close to midnight, the kind of hour when the city seemed quieter, almost lonely. Noah shoved his hands into his pockets and started the familiar walk toward his tiny apartment 4 blocks away. His shoes crunched on the thin layer of ice that had formed along the sidewalk. Life had not turned out the way he once imagined. At 32 years old, he was still working as a waiter, juggling double shifts just to keep up with rent and the bills that never seemed to stop coming. But Noah had learned something from life that many people never understood. When someone needed help, you did not stop to calculate what you might gain from it. You simply helped. A sharp screech of tires suddenly tore through the quiet night. Noah turned just in time to see headlights spinning wildly across the road. A black sedan slid across the icy intersection and slammed hard into the guardrail beside the bridge. The impact echoed through the empty street like a gunshot. For half a second, Noah froze. Then instinct took over. He ran toward the wreck. Steam hissed from the crushed hood, and the smell of gasoline filled the freezing air. Inside the driver's seat, a woman slumped against the steering wheel, her dark hair falling across her face. She looked unconscious. Noah yanked the door handle, but it would not budge. The metal had warped from the crash. He glanced down the road. No other cars. No witnesses. Only the distant glow of a street lamp flickering above the bridge. His heart pounded as he grabbed the edge of the door frame and pulled with everything he had. The metal groaned before finally giving way. The door jerked open. The woman stirred weakly, her breathing shallow. Noah leaned inside, carefully unbuckling the seatbelt that had locked across her chest. Just as he lifted her from the car, he heard a low crackling sound from beneath the hood. Fire. It started small, just a flicker of orange beneath twisted metal, but Noah knew it would spread quickly. Without hesitation, he carried her away from the wreck, his boots slipping on the frozen pavement as he moved toward the sidewalk. Moments later, the car erupted with a violent burst of flames behind them, lighting the bridge in a sudden wave of heat and orange light. Noah lowered the woman gently onto the cold pavement. Her eyes fluttered open for a brief moment. Confusion filled them. She looked at him as if trying to understand who he was or how she had ended up there. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Now back to the night that changed everything. Noah shrugged off his worn jacket and draped it carefully over her shoulders. Her skin was pale from the cold, and her hands trembled slightly. Hey, stay with me, he said quietly. Help is coming. In the distance, he could already hear the faint wail of approaching sirens. The woman looked up at him again, her voice barely more than a whisper carried by the winter wind. Thank you. Noah offered a small tired smile. He had no idea who she was. To him, she was just another stranger who needed help. But in less than 24 hours, the entire city would be searching for her name, and Noah Carter would discover that the woman he had pulled from that burning car was not just a stranger. She was Charlotte Whitmore, one of the most powerful millionaires in America. The flashing red and blue lights painted the frozen bridge in waves of color as the ambulance doors slammed shut. Noah Carter stood a few feet away, breathing heavily, watching the paramedics work quickly around the woman he had just pulled from the burning car. They asked him a few questions while they secured her on a stretcher. What did you see? Did she say anything? Was anyone else involved? Noah answered as best as he could, his voice still rough from the cold air and the adrenaline rushing through his body. One of the paramedics nodded toward him with quiet respect. You probably saved her life tonight. Noah did not know what to say to that. He simply watched as they lifted the stretcher into the ambulance. For a brief moment, the woman opened her eyes again. Her gaze found him across the chaos of flashing lights and moving figures. She looked confused, as if the world around her had become a puzzle she could not solve. Then the doors closed, and the ambulance pulled away into the night. Noah remained on the sidewalk long after the sirens disappeared. The burned wreck of the car still smoldered behind him, the twisted metal glowing faintly beneath the street lamp. Eventually, a police officer told him he could go home. The walk back to his apartment felt longer than usual. The wind cut through the thin fabric of his shirt now that his jacket was gone. His hands were numb, and his thoughts kept replaying the crash over and over again. The moment the door finally gave way, the sound of the fire beginning to spread, the way her voice had trembled when she whispered thank you. By the time Noah reached the narrow brick building where he lived, the sky had begun to fade from black to a deep gray. His apartment sat on the third floor above a small laundromat that never seemed to close. Inside, the room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a small table, and a kitchen sink that dripped slowly through the night. Noah dropped his shoes by the door and collapsed onto the bed without turning on the light. Sleep came quickly, heavy and dreamless. When he woke several hours later, the winter sun was already shining through the frosted window. His body ached from the tension of the night before. For a moment, he wondered if the entire event had been some strange dream, but the faint smell of smoke on his clothes reminded him it had all been real. Noah dressed quickly and headed back to the diner for the morning shift. The diner sat on a busy corner where the smell of coffee and bacon drifted out onto the sidewalk every morning. Inside, the familiar sound of clinking dishes and quiet conversations filled the room. His coworker Luis raised an eyebrow when he saw Noah walk in without his jacket. "Rough night, man." Noah shrugged as he tied his apron. "Something like that." The day passed in the usual blur of refilling coffee cups and carrying plates to tired office workers. Every so often Noah found himself thinking about the woman from the crash. He wondered if she was all right. He wondered if she even remembered the man who had dragged her out of the wreck. By late afternoon, the lunch crowd had thinned. Noah wiped down the counter while the small television above the coffee machine played the local news. At first, he barely paid attention. The reporter spoke about traffic delays and the weather forecast for the coming week. Then the anchorwoman suddenly changed her tone. "Authorities are searching for information regarding Charlotte Whitmore, a technology entrepreneur and philanthropist who was reported missing late last night after leaving a charity event downtown. Her last known location was near the river bridge shortly before midnight." The screen shifted to a photograph. Noah froze. The woman in the picture had the same dark hair, the same sharp eyes, the same face he had seen illuminated by the flames of a burning car only hours earlier. The diner suddenly felt very quiet around him as the realization slowly settled in. The stranger he had pulled from that wreck was not just another driver on an icy road. According to the news report, she was one of the wealthiest women in the entire country. And for reasons Noah could not yet understand, no one seemed to know where she was. The image of Charlotte Whitmore remained frozen on the small television above the coffee machine as the reporter continued speaking in a serious voice. The words technology entrepreneur and philanthropist echoed in Noah Carter's mind while he stared at the screen. The woman he had carried away from the burning car only hours earlier was not just another driver caught in an accident. According to the report, she was one of the most powerful millionaires in the country and the founder of one of the fastest growing technology companies in America. Luis noticed Noah staring and wiped his hands on a towel. "You know her or something?" Noah shook his head quickly. "No, just surprised." But inside his thoughts were racing. The reporter explained that Charlotte Whitmore had left a large charity gala shortly before midnight and had never arrived at her destination. Her family and business partners had already contacted authorities. The police were asking anyone who might have seen her near the river bridge to come forward. Noah turned away from the television and poured fresh coffee into a cup for a customer at the counter. He told himself it was none of his business. The woman was already safe when the ambulance took her away. The hospital would contact her family. The police would handle everything else. Still, something about the report made him uneasy. The news said no one knew where she was. But no one knew she had been taken away in an ambulance. He had watched the doors close. He had watched the flashing lights disappear into the night. The rest of his shift passed slowly. Each time the door of the diner opened, he glanced up without thinking. By early evening, the sky outside had turned dark again, and the dinner crowd had begun to arrive. The smell of grilled burgers and hot soup filled the small room, while the wind rattled softly against the windows. Noah carried a tray of plates toward the corner booth when the door opened once more. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just another customer stepping inside from the cold. But then he saw her face. Noah stopped walking. Standing near the entrance was the woman from the crash. Her dark hair was pulled loosely over one shoulder, and she wore a simple coat that looked borrowed and slightly too large for her. There was a faint bandage along her temple. For a moment, she scanned the diner as if searching for something familiar. When her eyes landed on Noah, she paused. Recognition flickered slowly across her expression. The tray in Noah's hands felt suddenly heavier. "You should be in a hospital," he said quietly as he set the plates down on a nearby table and walked toward her. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "I remember you," she said slowly. "You were there on the bridge." Noah nodded. "The ambulance took you to the hospital. Are you all right?" She hesitated before answering. "The doctor said I was lucky. Just a concussion and some bruises." Her voice carried a calm softness that did not quite match the tension in her eyes. Noah noticed something else as well. She did not look like the confident business leader from the news photograph. Instead, she seemed uncertain, almost lost. After a moment, she spoke again. "They told me my name is Charlotte Whitmore." Noah felt a strange chill move through his chest. "You mean you do not remember?" She shook her head slowly. "Not much. Just fragments. Faces that do not stay clear. Places that feel distant." She looked around the diner again as if the ordinary scenes somehow grounded her in the moment. "The doctors said the memory might come back soon. Or maybe it will take time." Noah studied her carefully. The woman standing in front of him did not look like someone hiding the identity of a millionaire. She looked like someone trying to understand her own life. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Charlotte gave a small, uncertain smile. "I asked the hospital where the ambulance picked me up. One of the nurses said a man had carried me away from the car before it caught fire." She looked directly at him now. "I thought I should thank him properly." Noah rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "You already did." Charlotte shook her head again, her expression more serious this time. "No, I do not think I did. Because according to everyone on the news this morning, you might be the only person in this city who saw what really happened on that bridge." Noah Carter stood quietly for a moment after Charlotte Whitmore finished speaking, the sounds of the diner returning slowly around them like a distant hum. The clinking of plates, the low murmur of customers, and the smell of hot coffee filled the air, yet the space between them felt strangely separate from everything else. Noah studied her face again. The bandage near her temple looked real. The uncertainty in her eyes looked even more real. If this was an act, it was a convincing one. "You should probably be somewhere warmer than standing by the door," Noah said gently. Charlotte glanced around the diner again, as if noticing the room for the first time. The place was simple, nothing like the elegant halls that someone with her reputation would normally walk through. Vinyl booths lined the walls, the counter shined under soft yellow lights, and a faded menu hung above the kitchen window. It smelled like grilled onions and fresh coffee. For some reason, the normalness of the place seemed to calm her. Noah led her to an empty booth near the window and slid a cup of hot coffee toward her. "You probably need this more than I do," he said. Charlotte wrapped her hands around the warm mug and let out a quiet breath. "Thank you. For the coffee and for last night." Noah sat across from her, still unsure what to say next. According to the news, half the city was looking for her. Her company was worth billions of dollars, and she had probably spoken in front of rooms filled with powerful people all over the world. Yet right now she looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong story. Charlotte glanced out the window where snow had begun falling lightly again. The white flakes drifted slowly through the glow of the streetlights. "I wish I could remember more about my life," she admitted quietly. "The doctors asked me questions this morning, and I could not answer most of them." Noah leaned back slightly. "That must be a strange feeling. It is like opening a book and finding half the pages missing," she said. "I know the title of the story. I know my name. But the rest of it feels empty." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Charlotte looked back at him with a thoughtful expression. "The nurse told me something else. She said the police were asking questions about the crash." Noah felt his shoulders tense. "I already told them everything I saw. It happened fast." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I believe you. But according to the news this morning, people are already speculating about what happened. Some think it was just ice on the road. Others think someone might have forced my car off the bridge." Noah frowned slightly. "Did you see anyone following you before the crash?" Charlotte closed her eyes for a moment as if searching through fog. "I remember leaving the charity event. I remember driving through the city lights. Then there was a car behind me. After that, everything becomes blurry." Her voice lowered as she opened her eyes again. "If someone really was following me, then whoever did it might think I did not survive the crash." Noah let that thought settle for a moment. That would make you safer than anyone realizes. Charlotte looked at him curiously. What do you mean? If people believe you are still missing, Noah said slowly, then whoever caused the crash might not come looking for you yet. Charlotte considered that carefully. Her fingers tightened slightly around the warm mug. So what are you suggesting? Noah hesitated. The idea forming in his mind felt strange even as he spoke it. For a little while it might be better if no one knows where you are. Charlotte watched him with quiet interest. And where exactly would I be hiding? Noah gave a small, uncertain laugh. He gestured around the modest diner and then toward the quiet street outside. Somewhere no one would ever expect a powerful millionaire like Charlotte Whitmore to be. For the first time since she entered the diner, Charlotte smiled with genuine amusement. Are you saying I should hide here with you? Noah shook his head quickly. Not exactly. But if someone dangerous really did cause that crash, then you might need someone nearby who already knows what happened that night. Charlotte studied him for a long moment before speaking again. And why would you help me with something like that? Noah answered without hesitation. Because last night, I pulled you out of a burning car. I guess that means we are already part of the same story now. Charlotte leaned back slightly, the faint smile still on her lips. In that case, Noah Carter, she said softly, perhaps you should tell me how the next chapter begins. Charlotte Whitmore rested her hands around the warm mug while the snow continued drifting past the diner window. And for a moment the small booth felt like the quiet center of a storm neither of them fully understood. Noah Carter leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so the nearby customers could not hear. If someone really did force your car off that bridge, he said carefully, then that person probably believes the crash finished the job. Charlotte listened without interrupting, her expression calm but focused. Noah continued, the news is saying you are missing. That means whoever caused the crash has no reason to think you are sitting here in a diner drinking coffee. Charlotte nodded slowly as the idea settled into place. So you think I should stay invisible for a while? At least until we understand what really happened, Noah replied. Charlotte looked down at the table for a moment. The strange part was that she did not feel frightened by the idea. Instead, she felt oddly steady, as if the uncertainty of her missing memories had already pushed her beyond the point of fear. Then she looked up again. And where exactly would I stay while I am invisible? Noah hesitated for a second before answering honestly. My apartment is not exactly what someone like you is used to. It is small. Very small. Charlotte smiled faintly. I am not exactly what someone like me used to be either. According to everyone else, I used to run a massive company and make decisions that affected thousands of people. But right now I cannot even remember what my own living room looks like. Noah could not help smiling back. Fair point. At that moment, Luis walked past the booth carrying a tray of burgers and raised his eyebrows at Noah. Friend of yours? Noah shrugged. Something like that. Luis gave Charlotte a friendly nod before disappearing into the kitchen again. Charlotte watched him go and then looked back at Noah. There is something else we should consider, she said quietly. If people are searching for me, eventually someone will recognize me, even if I try to stay hidden. Noah thought about that for a moment, and then an idea slowly formed in his mind. Actually, there might be a way around that. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. I am listening. Noah leaned forward. If someone sees you with me, they will not be looking for Charlotte Whitmore, the missing millionaire. They will just see a regular couple. Charlotte studied him curiously. A regular couple. Yes, Noah said with a small, uncertain laugh. My family has been giving me a hard time lately about never bringing anyone to gatherings. My sister is hosting a small dinner tomorrow night, and she will not stop asking when I am going to show up with a girlfriend. Charlotte stared at him for a moment before a spark of amusement appeared in her eyes. Are you suggesting that I pretend to be your girlfriend? Noah raised both hands quickly. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. But if you are with me in a normal setting, no one is going to suspect anything unusual. Charlotte leaned back in the booth, considering the idea. Outside the diner, the snow continued falling quietly under the streetlights. Finally, she spoke. Again, let me see if I understand this correctly. I am a missing millionaire with no clear memory of my life. Someone may have tried to kill me, and your solution is that I attend a family dinner pretending to be your girlfriend. Noah nodded slowly. When you say it like that, it does sound a little strange. Charlotte watched him for another moment before suddenly laughing softly. It was the first genuine laugh she had allowed herself since waking in the hospital. Noah Carter, she said warmly, that might be the most unexpected plan I have ever heard. Then her expression softened with curiosity. But considering the fact that you already saved my life once, Perhaps trusting you with the next step is not the worst idea in the world. Noah exhaled in relief. So you were saying yes. Charlotte lifted the coffee mug again and took a small sip before answering. I am saying that for now, until my memory returns, and until we understand what happened on that bridge, Charlotte Whitmore will disappear. And in her place, there will simply be a woman named Charlotte who happens to be dating a waiter named Noah Carter. The next evening arrived quietly, but inside Noah Carter's small apartment, the air felt charged with nervous energy. The narrow room looked even smaller now that Charlotte Whitmore stood inside it, studying the space with calm curiosity. The apartment was barely large enough for a single bed, a worn sofa, a tiny kitchen counter, and a narrow window that looked out toward the glowing lights of the city street below. Noah stood near the door, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. I warned you it was not exactly luxury, he said. Charlotte turned slowly in the middle of the room, taking in every detail from the chipped coffee table to the stack of books near the window. Strangely, there was no judgment in her expression. Instead, there was something almost thoughtful. It feels real, she said quietly. Noah blinked in surprise. Real? Charlotte nodded. Everything about my life that people describe sounds huge and complicated. Massive offices, important meetings, endless travel. But this room feels honest. Noah gave a small, uncertain laugh. Honest is another way of saying small and slightly messy. Charlotte smiled gently before walking toward the window. Snow continued falling outside, coating the sidewalks in a thin white layer. For a moment, she watched the quiet street below before turning back to Noah. So tell me about this dinner. Noah exhaled slowly and grabbed his jacket from the chair. My sister Emily hosts it every year. It is not anything fancy, just family. My parents will be there. My sister and her husband. Maybe a few neighbors who always show up for the food. Charlotte listened carefully. And they are expecting you to bring someone. Noah nodded. They have been asking for years why I never bring a girlfriend. I think my mother is convinced I secretly plan to spend my entire life alone. Charlotte laughed softly at that. Then tonight we will solve that mystery for them. Noah hesitated before speaking again. We should probably agree on a simple story. Charlotte folded her arms slightly, intrigued. I was thinking the same thing. Noah paced slowly across the room as he explained. We met at the diner where I work. You came in for coffee one evening. We started talking. Nothing dramatic. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. Simple stories are easier to remember. Then she looked down at the oversized coat she was wearing, borrowed from the hospital lost property department after the crash. There is one problem with this story though. Noah followed her gaze and understood immediately. The coat was too big, the sleeves slightly worn. It looked nothing like something a successful woman would normally wear. Charlotte must have noticed the same thing because she gave a playful shrug. I suppose your family might wonder how a woman dressed like this became your girlfriend. Noah walked to the closet and pulled out a simple blue sweater that had belonged to his sister years earlier, before she moved away. It might be a little large, but it is cleaner than that coat. Charlotte accepted the sweater with a warm smile. Thank you. A few minutes later she returned from the bathroom wearing the sweater and her hair loosely tied back. The change was simple, but somehow it made her look completely different. Not like a powerful business leader, not like a missing millionaire from the evening news. Just like a woman preparing to meet her boyfriend family for the first time. Noah stared for a second before quickly looking away. You look perfect, he said quietly. Charlotte noticed the sudden nervousness in his voice and smiled again. Relax. Noah Carter. We are only pretending. Noah grabbed his car keys and opened the apartment door. The cold winter air rushed into the hallway as they stepped outside. During the drive across the city, the snow fell heavier, covering the streets in soft white silence. Charlotte watched the passing buildings through the car window, her mind filled with questions about a life she could not remember. Finally, she turned toward Noah. Tell me something honestly, she said. Noah glanced at her briefly while keeping his eyes on the road. What is that? Charlotte spoke softly but with real curiosity. If my memory never returns, would you still have saved me that night? Noah answered without hesitation. Of course. Charlotte looked back out the window, the reflection of the falling snow glowing in the glass. Then tonight, she whispered, I suppose it is only fair that I help save you from your family questions. A few minutes later, Noah turned onto a quiet suburban street where warm lights glowed from the windows of a small house at the end of the block. Laughter could already be heard through the door as he parked the car. Noah took a deep breath and looked at Charlotte. Ready? Charlotte smiled with calm confidence. Lead the way, boyfriend. Warm light spilled through the windows of the small suburban house as Noah Carter and Charlotte Whitmore walked up the narrow path covered with fresh snow. Inside they could hear the sound of cheerful voices and the faint clatter of dishes. The smell of roasted chicken and baked bread drifted through the cold evening air. Noah paused at the front door and looked at Charlotte for a moment. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. Charlotte gave him a calm smile. After surviving a burning car and pretending to date a waiter, I think I can survive dinner with your family. Noah laughed nervously and knocked on the door. A moment later it swung open and a woman with warm brown eyes and flour dust on her apron stepped forward. Noah, brother, you finally made it. Emily Carter wrapped him in a quick hug before pulling back with curiosity shining across her face. And who is this? Noah cleared his throat slightly. Emily, this is Charlotte. Charlotte, this is my sister Emily. Charlotte stepped forward and offered a polite smile. It is very nice to meet you. Emily's eyes widened just a little as she looked Charlotte up and down. Well, I am glad my brother finally proved he is capable of bringing a beautiful woman to dinner. Come in before the food gets cold. They stepped inside where the living room glowed with warm light, and soft music played quietly from a radio in the corner. A tall man stood near the kitchen doorway, holding a plate of bread rolls. That must be the famous Noah girlfriend we have been hearing about, he joked. Noah shook his head. Charlotte, this is Daniel. Emily husband. Daniel shook Charlotte's hand warmly. Any woman willing to date Noah deserves a medal for bravery. Charlotte laughed softly. I am still deciding if I agree with that. The room filled quickly with friendly conversation as Noah's parents joined them from the dining table. His mother Martha Carter greeted Charlotte with gentle enthusiasm, while his father Robert Carter offered a firm handshake and a welcoming smile. For the first few minutes Charlotte listened more than she spoke, quietly observing the easy rhythm of the family around her. They joked with each other, interrupted one another, and spoke with the comfortable honesty that only comes from years of shared history. Charlotte felt something stir inside her chest, a quiet feeling she could not fully explain. During dinner, Emily leaned forward with curiosity sparkling in her eyes. So Charlotte, how exactly did you and my mysterious brother meet? Noah nearly choked on his drink before Charlotte answered smoothly. I stopped by the diner where Noah works for coffee one evening. We started talking and realized we had more in common than we expected. Emily looked impressed. That sounds like the kind of story people tell their grandchildren one day. Noah felt a wave of relief that Charlotte remembered the simple explanation they had prepared earlier. The evening continued with laughter and stories about Noah's childhood that made Charlotte smile again and again. She watched the way Noah listened to his parents and helped Emily clear the table without being asked. There was something steady about him, something quietly dependable. For a brief moment Charlotte wondered what her own family dinners used to feel like. Then a sudden voice from the living room interrupted the warm atmosphere. Daniel had turned on the television for the evening news. The reporter voice filled the room. As everyone glanced toward the screen, authorities continue searching for technology entrepreneur Charlotte Whitmore, who disappeared last night after leaving a charity event downtown. Police are still investigating whether the accident near the river bridge was connected to her disappearance. Charlotte felt her heart skip a beat as her own photograph appeared on the screen. For a split second the room fell silent. Emily frowned slightly. That is strange. That woman looks a little like you, Charlotte. Noah immediately spoke before anyone else could react. Just a coincidence. Charlotte forced a small smile and nodded politely. It must be. But as the news continued describing the missing millionaire and the possible investigation surrounding the crash, Charlotte realized something chilling. If someone inside this quiet room decided to look more closely, the truth might reveal itself sooner than either of them expected. For a long moment, the warm living room felt strangely frozen as the image of Charlotte Whitmore remained on the television screen. The reporter voice continued calmly, describing the search for the missing technology entrepreneur, while the bright photograph showed a confident woman standing on a stage during a business conference. The Charlotte in the photograph looked polished, powerful, and completely certain of her place in the world. The Charlotte sitting at Noah Carter family dinner table felt like a completely different person. Noah reached for his glass of water, forcing himself to remain calm. Just a coincidence, he repeated lightly, hoping the conversation would move on. Daniel lowered the volume on the television, but did not turn it off. Still, that is a strange coincidence, he said with a thoughtful grin. Emily looked back and forth between the television and Charlotte for another moment before shrugging. Well, the world is full of people who look alike. I once saw someone who looked exactly like my high school teacher at the grocery store. Robert Carter nodded while cutting another piece of chicken. That happens more often than people think. Charlotte felt a quiet wave of relief wash through her chest. She kept her smile relaxed and focused on the dinner conversation as Emily began asking Noah about his work schedule again. Slowly the tension faded from the room, and the warm rhythm of family chatter returned. Plates were cleared from the table, and Martha Carter brought out a homemade apple pie that filled the house with the smell of cinnamon and butter. Charlotte helped Emily carry dishes into the kitchen, and for a moment the two women stood side by side at the sink rinsing plates. Emily glanced toward Charlotte with a curious but friendly expression. "I hope my brother did not scare you off with his awkwardness earlier," she said softly. Charlotte smiled. "He has been very kind to me." Emily nodded approvingly. "That sounds like Noah. He has always been the kind of person who helps people even when it makes his own life harder." Charlotte paused for a moment at those words. She thought about the freezing night on the bridge and the moment Noah had pulled open the damaged car door without hesitation. "Your brother saved my life once already," she said quietly before realizing what she had just revealed. Emily turned toward her quickly. "Saved your life?" Charlotte quickly corrected herself with a gentle laugh. "I mean, he saved me from a terrible cup of coffee at the diner where we met." Emily laughed and shook her head. "That sounds more like it." Meanwhile, in the living room, Noah stood near the television while Daniel watched the end of the news report. The anchorwoman's voice remained calm, but serious. "Authorities are now reviewing surveillance footage from traffic cameras near the river bridge where the accident occurred. Investigators have not ruled out the possibility that another vehicle may have forced Charlotte Whitmore's car off the road. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Chicago Police Department." Noah felt his stomach tighten slightly. The investigation was moving faster than he expected. Daniel crossed his arms thoughtfully. "That story is getting stranger every hour. Imagine someone trying to run a millionaire off the road." Noah forced a casual shrug. "People say a lot of things on the news." Daniel turned the television off and looked back toward the kitchen. "Well, if that woman really is missing, I hope they find her soon." In the kitchen, Charlotte dried the last plate and placed it carefully in the cabinet. At that exact moment, a sudden flash of memory flickered through her mind. It was not clear or complete, but she saw a pair of bright headlights in a rearview mirror and heard the distant roar of an engine accelerating behind her car. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared. Charlotte gripped the edge of the counter for balance as her heartbeat quickened. Emily noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" Charlotte nodded slowly, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "I think I just remembered something about the crash." Charlotte Whitmore kept her hand on the kitchen counter for a moment as the brief flash of memory faded like fog disappearing under sunlight. Emily Carter looked at her with concern while the sounds of quiet conversation continued from the living room. "Did something happen?" Emily asked gently. Charlotte took a slow breath and tried to steady herself. "I think I remembered something from the night of the crash." Emily tilted her head slightly, curious but unaware of the deeper truth behind those words. Charlotte lowered her voice instinctively. "For a moment I saw headlights in my mirror. A car behind me moving very fast. Then everything went dark again." Emily gave a sympathetic smile, assuming Charlotte was simply remembering a stressful driving incident. "Well, that sounds frightening. Maybe you should sit down for a minute." Charlotte nodded politely and followed Emily back into the living room where Noah Carter was standing near the sofa speaking quietly with his father. The moment Noah saw her face, he recognized the tension in her expression. Something had changed. He stepped closer immediately. "Are you all right?" Charlotte glanced toward the others and then spoke softly, so only Noah could hear. "I remembered something." Noah felt his chest tighten slightly. "What kind of memory?" "Headlights behind my car. A vehicle accelerating toward me before the crash." Noah's eyes darkened as he absorbed the meaning of her words. "That was not ice on the road. That was someone chasing you." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I cannot see the driver. I cannot remember the color of the car. But I know it was there." Before Noah could respond, the quiet atmosphere of the house suddenly shifted. A loud knock echoed through the front door. Everyone in the room paused. Robert Carter looked up from his chair. "That is strange." We are not expecting anyone else tonight. Emily walked toward the door and opened it cautiously. Standing outside were two men wearing dark winter coats and serious expressions. One of them held up a badge. "Good evening, ma'am. We are with the Chicago Police Department. We are asking neighbors in this area if anyone has seen something unusual regarding the missing person investigation." For Charlotte Whitmore. The room grew completely silent. Charlotte's heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it in her ears. From where she stood near the sofa, she could see the officers clearly through the doorway. The taller one stepped forward politely. "We are following up on new information from traffic cameras near the river bridge." Emily looked slightly confused, but welcoming as always. "Oh, of course, officers. Please come in if you need to ask questions." Noah moved instinctively closer to Charlotte, his mind racing through possible explanations. The officers stepped inside and removed their hats, brushing snow from their shoulders. One of them glanced around the living room before speaking again. "We believe the missing woman may have been forced off the road by another vehicle. We are trying to determine if anyone in the city has seen her since the accident." Charlotte kept her eyes lowered, her face partially turned away from the light. Noah spoke calmly before anyone else could say a word. "We just saw the report on the news." "That sounds terrible." The officer nodded. "It is a serious situation." He pulled a folded photograph from his coat pocket and held it up. The picture showed Charlotte Whitmore standing confidently beside a large technology conference stage. The officer's voice remained professional but firm. "This is the woman we are searching for. Have any of you seen her recently?" The room felt impossibly small as the photograph passed from Robert Carter to Emily and then toward Noah. Charlotte sat very still beside him, her hands resting quietly in her lap. For a moment Noah considered the risk of the situation. One wrong glance, one moment of hesitation. The truth could explode into the room. He took the photograph calmly and studied it, as if seeing the image for the first time. Then he shook his head slowly. "No, officer. I cannot say that I have." The officer looked around the room once more before nodding politely. "Thank you for your time. If anyone remembers anything unusual, please contact us immediately." As the officers turned toward the door, Charlotte finally allowed herself to breathe again. But just before leaving, the taller officer paused near the hallway mirror. For a brief second his eyes flickered toward Charlotte's reflection in the glass, and his expression changed ever so slightly. The taller police officer stood motionless for a brief second as his eyes lingered on the reflection in the hallway mirror. Charlotte Whitmore felt a chill run through her chest, even though she kept her posture calm and her expression neutral. The reflection in the glass showed only the side of her face, partially hidden by the soft light of the living room lamp. For a moment the officer studied it carefully, as if comparing the image in his mind with the photograph he had just shown to the family. Noah Carter felt the tension instantly. Every instinct in his body told him that the next few seconds would decide everything. Then the officer finally turned back toward the front door. "Thank you again for your time," he said politely. "If anything comes to mind, please contact the Chicago Police Department." Emily Carter smiled warmly as she held the door open. "Of course, officer. I hope you find her soon." The two officers stepped back into the cold winter night, and the door closed behind them with a quiet click. For several seconds no one in the room spoke. Then Robert Carter exhaled slowly. "That poor woman on the news must have a lot of people worried about her." Emily nodded while returning to the kitchen. "I cannot imagine how frightening it must be for her family." Charlotte kept her eyes lowered until the sound of dishes and conversation slowly returned to normal. Only then did she allow herself to breathe deeply again. Noah leaned slightly closer to her and spoke quietly so the others could not hear. "I think that was too close." Charlotte nodded. "The officer saw my reflection. I felt it." Noah glanced toward the front door to make sure it was fully closed. "They did not say anything. That means they are not certain." Charlotte looked down at her hands resting in her lap. "But they will keep searching. And if someone really forced my car off the road, that person might also be watching the investigation." Noah considered that carefully. "The investigation just changed tonight." Charlotte looked up at him. "What do you mean?" Noah lowered his voice further. "The officers said traffic cameras showed another vehicle near the bridge. That means someone tried to run you off the road." Charlotte nodded slowly. The memory of headlights behind her car flickered again in her mind like distant lightning. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. It was not an accident. Noah continued thinking aloud. If the police are reviewing camera footage, then they will eventually identify the other vehicle. Charlotte's voice became quiet but firm. Unless the person responsible has enough power to hide the truth. Noah studied her expression carefully. Even without her memories, there was a sharp intelligence in her eyes. The kind of focus that suggested she had once spent years solving complicated problems. Charlotte leaned slightly closer to him. There is something else I am starting to realize. Noah waited. If someone wanted me dead, she said softly, then that person probably knew exactly where I was going that night. Noah understood immediately. Someone close to you. Someone who had access to your schedule. Charlotte nodded. Which means the danger may not only come from outside. The room suddenly felt smaller around them as the possibilities settled into place. Emily returned from the kitchen carrying fresh slices of pie. Dessert is ready if anyone still has room. The warm smell of apples and cinnamon filled the air again as she placed the plates on the table. Charlotte forced a gentle smile and accepted the slice Emily offered her. Thank you. While the family resumed their cheerful conversation, Noah quietly leaned closer once more. When we leave tonight, we need to be careful, he whispered. Charlotte met his eyes calmly. I agree. But now we have one advantage we did not have before. Noah raised an eyebrow. What advantage is that? Charlotte answered in a voice so soft only he could hear. Whoever tried to kill Charlotte Whitmore still believes she disappeared in that burning car. And the longer they believe that lie, the more time we have to discover the truth. The drive back to the city felt quieter than the journey earlier that evening. Snow continued to fall across the streets of Chicago, coating the sidewalks and rooftops in a soft white layer that reflected the glow of streetlights. Inside Noah Carter's small car, the heater hummed softly, while Charlotte Whitmore stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights pass by in long golden streaks. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Both were replaying the events of the night in their minds. Finally, Charlotte broke the silence. That police officer knew something felt strange. Noah kept his eyes on the road. I noticed that too. He did not recognize you for certain, but he was close. Charlotte nodded slowly. Which means we cannot risk another moment like that. Noah glanced toward her briefly. You think we should leave the city? Charlotte shook her head. No. If we leave now, we lose the only advantage we have. Noah understood what she meant immediately. The person responsible still believed Charlotte Whitmore had vanished. If she disappeared again, there would be too many questions. Charlotte leaned back in the seat and spoke thoughtfully. The police said they were reviewing traffic cameras from the bridge. If the other car appears on that footage, then sooner or later they will trace it to someone. Noah slowed the car as they approached a red light. Unless that someone has enough influence to bury the evidence. Charlotte did not answer right away. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment as if searching her mind again. For the first time since the crash, the memories felt slightly closer, like distant voices trying to reach her through fog. When she opened her eyes again, she spoke quietly. I remember something else. Noah looked toward her quickly. What did you see? Charlotte spoke slowly, concentrating on every detail she could pull from the darkness of her memory. I was leaving the charity event. The parking garage was nearly empty. A man was speaking with someone on the phone near the elevator. When I walked past him, he suddenly stopped talking. Noah waited carefully. Charlotte continued. I could not see his face clearly, but I remember his voice. It sounded familiar, like someone I had heard many times before. Noah considered that carefully. Someone from your company, maybe. Charlotte nodded. That is what it felt like. Someone who knew where I was going that night. The traffic light turned green and Noah drove forward again. If that man followed you out of the garage, then he might be the same person who chased your car to the bridge. Charlotte's gaze drifted back toward the window as the city lights reflected across the glass. That means the person who tried to kill me is not a stranger. It is someone who knows my life. Someone who understands my schedule and my movements. Noah felt the seriousness of that realization settle heavily in the car. When they reached his apartment building, the snow had begun falling harder, covering the street in a quiet white blanket. Noah parked the car and turned off the engine. For a moment, they remained sitting in the silence. Charlotte looked toward the building entrance and then back at Noah. When my memory returns fully, she said softly, everything will change. Noah studied her expression carefully. What do you mean? Charlotte's voice carried a calm certainty that surprised even her. If I remember who that man was, then the person responsible will realize that Charlotte Whitmore is still alive. Noah understood immediately. And when that happens, Whoever tried to kill you may try again. Charlotte met his eyes without hesitation. Yes, but by then we will already be waiting for him. Noah stepped out of the car, and the cold winter air rushed around them as they walked toward the apartment building together. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street with its headlights off. Inside the car, a shadowed figure watched them carefully through the falling snow. And the moment Charlotte stepped under the light near the entrance, the figure slowly reached for a phone. The snow continued falling steadily through the Chicago night as Noah Carter and Charlotte Whitmore climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan across the street slowly pulling away from the curb. Inside the small apartment, the air felt warmer and safer than the silent street below. Noah locked the door carefully behind them and turned the deadbolt. Charlotte set the borrowed coat aside and stood near the window for a moment, watching the white snow settle on the quiet sidewalk. Something about the stillness of the night made her thoughts feel clearer than they had since the crash. Noah placed 2 cups of hot tea on the small kitchen table and motioned for her to sit. You should rest. Tonight has been a lot for one day. Charlotte wrapped her hands around the warm cup, but did not drink. Her eyes remained distant, as if something inside her mind was shifting again. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the heater and the wind brushing against the window glass. Then Charlotte suddenly inhaled sharply. Noah noticed immediately. Another memory. Charlotte nodded slowly. This one is stronger. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the fragments forming in her mind. I remember the parking garage again. The man with the phone. His voice. Noah leaned forward. What about his voice? Charlotte opened her eyes and looked directly at him. I know who it was. Noah felt a sudden tension fill the room. Who? Charlotte spoke the name quietly, but with complete certainty. Michael Grayson. Noah frowned slightly. Who is that? Charlotte answered without hesitation. The chief financial officer of my company. He has worked beside me for years. He manages every major financial decision. Noah's mind raced through the implication immediately. Someone that powerful could easily hide evidence or manipulate an investigation. Charlotte nodded grimly. And he always knew my schedule, my meetings, my travel plans. If anyone could have followed me that night without raising suspicion, it would be him. Noah sat back slowly. That means the person responsible for the crash is not just someone from your world. It is someone very close to the center of it. Charlotte's voice grew steadier as the pieces of memory began reconnecting. I also remember hearing him argue with someone earlier that evening at the charity event. Something about a financial investigation that was about to become public. Noah understood what that might mean. You were about to expose something. Charlotte nodded. I think he believed I had discovered it. And if that investigation became public, it could destroy everything he built inside the company. Noah stood and walked slowly toward the window. Outside, the snow continued falling over the empty street. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he turned back toward her. If that man is really behind the crash, then the police need to know. Charlotte shook her head. Not yet. Noah looked surprised. Why not? Charlotte spoke calmly. Because right now the police are still searching for a missing woman. If Michael Grayson hears that Charlotte Whitmore has suddenly reappeared alive, he will erase every trace of evidence before investigators can reach it. Noah realized she was right. The element of surprise was the only real advantage they had left. Charlotte stood up from the table and walked slowly toward him. The faint reflection of city lights moved across the window behind her. We need proof before anyone learns I survived the crash. Noah nodded slowly. Then we find that proof together. Charlotte gave a small but determined smile. Tomorrow we start with the one place Michael Grayson will never expect me to return. Noah raised an eyebrow. Where's that? Charlotte answered with quiet confidence. My own company headquarters. Noah opened his mouth to respond, but stopped when the sound of a faint vibration echoed through the room. Charlotte looked down at the kitchen table where a small object lay beside the teacups. It was a phone. The screen glowed with a single incoming message. Charlotte Whitmore is alive. For a long moment, neither of them moved as the reality of that message settled into the room. For several seconds, Noah Carter and Charlotte Whitmore stared at the glowing phone screen on the kitchen table. The message remained there in cold, simple words. Charlotte Whitmore is alive. Charlotte felt her heartbeat slow rather than speed up. Instead of fear, a strange calm settled over her mind. Whoever sent that message believed they had discovered the truth, which meant the person responsible was now moving faster than before. Noah looked up at her carefully. Do you think it is him? Charlotte nodded without hesitation. Michael Grayson. If he already suspects I survived the crash, then he will try to finish what he started. Noah crossed the small room and locked the apartment door once more before turning back toward her. Then tomorrow we stop hiding. Charlotte met his eyes with quiet determination. Exactly. The following morning the snow had stopped, and the city streets glowed under bright winter sunlight. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Whitmore Technologies, the building buzzed with the normal rhythm of employees arriving for work. No one expected anything unusual when a black car stopped quietly outside the front entrance. Noah stepped out first, glancing around the street before Charlotte followed beside him. She wore a simple coat and dark glasses, but the moment she stepped through the revolving doors, the lobby seemed to fall silent. Several employees stared in disbelief. One young assistant nearly dropped the tablet she was carrying. Charlotte Whitmore had disappeared from the world 2 nights earlier. Yet here she was walking calmly through the building as if she had never left. Charlotte moved directly toward the executive conference room where the morning board meeting had just begun. Noah followed a step behind her. Inside the room, Michael Grayson stood at the head of the table presenting financial projections to the board of directors. His confident voice stopped instantly when the doors opened. Charlotte stepped into the room and removed her glasses. "Good morning, Michael," she said calmly. For the first time in years, the chief financial officer's face lost all color. "Charlotte Whitmore," he whispered. "That is impossible." The other executives around the table exchanged confused glances as Charlotte placed a folder of documents onto the table. "The police have been reviewing traffic camera footage from the bridge," she said evenly. "But before they could finish their investigation, I remembered something important." She opened the folder and slid several printed financial reports across the table. Records of illegal transfers, hidden accounts, evidence that someone inside this company had been stealing millions of dollars for years. Michael Grayson's hands trembled slightly as he realized what she had uncovered. "You do not understand what you are doing," he said sharply. Charlotte's voice remained steady. "I understand perfectly. When you realized I had discovered the missing money, you decided the easiest solution was to remove me permanently." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. At that moment, the conference room doors opened again, and 2 detectives from the Chicago Police Department stepped inside. The taller officer spoke firmly. "Michael Grayson, you are under arrest for attempted murder and financial fraud." As the officers placed him in handcuffs, Michael stared at Charlotte with disbelief. "You should have died in that car." Charlotte answered quietly. "I almost did. But someone pulled me out before the fire reached the engine." She turned slightly toward Noah, who stood silently near the doorway. For the first time, the board members noticed him. A simple waiter who had unknowingly changed the entire outcome of the story. Several months later, spring sunlight filled a quiet restaurant on the Chicago riverfront. A small sign above the door read Carter and Company. Inside the restaurant, Noah Carter adjusted a row of freshly set tables while Charlotte watched from the window seat with a warm smile. After the investigation ended and her company stabilized, Charlotte had quietly invested in Noah's dream of opening his own place. Noah walked over and sat across from her. "So tell me something honestly," he said with a soft laugh. "Was pretending to be my girlfriend the strangest decision you ever made?" Charlotte reached across the table and took his hand gently. "At first it was pretending, but somewhere between a burning car and a family dinner, it stopped being a story." Noah raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Charlotte smiled as the sunlight reflected across the river outside. "Now it is simply the truth."